Hi guys, my name is Boomchi Kumar, Director Security Consulting at Trace3. I run the Cyber Resiliency here at Trace. So we are here during the RSA week, and as we know, cyber resiliency is not just a topic; it has become a main stage event in RSA or any security conversations which we have. So today we'll unpack how Trace3 and NetApp work together to help clients stay online, recover fast, and stay resilient and into a competitive edge. With me, I have Rohit Kapoor from NetApp. Rohit, on to you.
Hi, Boomshi. I'm extremely excited to be here. Looking forward to Trace3 and NetApp solving top-of-mind problems for our customers, which is cyber resiliency. Quick introduction about me. I lead our cyber resiliency product portfolio at NetApp. And my team is focused on one single mission. How can we ensure that we can keep our customers' businesses running in the case of cyber event? So recovery is the name of the game. We absolutely need to make sure that we build that resiliency in the core infrastructure that can help our customers keep operating their businesses. Boomshi, I would love to get your thoughts. When you're in an event and an organization has been hit by a ransomware, what is the shift or the change you have seen in the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, Rohit, good question. Unfortunately or fortunately, being in this business for many, many, many years, right? We have seen multiple shift, but in last, 2 to 3 years, it has been a pretty big shift in terms of how customers were looking just backup and recovery versus how they are looking at being more resilient, right? Because the rally cry has changed. There is no more. People don't care about 1Z and 2Z kind of recoveries anymore, right? They care about, hey, what if I hit by a cyber event, which is it's kind of a question of if but when, right? So there is a huge shift in the mentality of how customers are looking backup and recovery into a more cyber resilient framework. But even from the bad actors' perspective, we are seeing that the autonomy of ransomware back in the days was, hey, I insert something, wait for 90 days, and the dwell times were 90 days or more, right? But with AI coming into picture, we are seeing that the dwell times itself have reduced. So it has become utmost important for customer to A, how soon I can identify a threat within my environment, right? Now, identifying a threat could be within the perimeter control of a security realm. But for us, for customers, it's also becoming important that how can identify threats within my data protection system itself, right?
Yeah.
So that to me a huge shift. And I'm seeing that there is a massive emphasis right now on identity resiliency as well, because as we know, they don't break in, they log in, right? If you look at majority of the events we have seen in last, 6 months or so, or maybe a year or so, majority of them have been an identity breach. So identity resiliency is becoming top of the food chain in this framework. That's kind of very important. And then, as I mentioned, it's when it comes to a cyber event, it's about how soon I can bring my minimum viable company back, because it's not a failover event, it's a recovery event.
Exactly.
So and when you have to do a bulk recovery, your RTOs go for a toss. So it's also important for customer and us to think from the framework in terms of how soon I can identify a clean recovery point, but moreover, along with that, how soon I take the recovery action versus a failover action.
Absolutely.
Right.
And this is exactly what we are seeing at the data layer itself. The paradigm has shifted from you have to assume the breach will happen.
Yep.
prevention is no longer the game here. It's all about recovery. How can we give recovery assurance to our customers? How can we ensure that we build that immunity into the data infrastructure that can allow them to lock the data, isolate the data to exactly to your point around bringing their minimum viable business on. And that's the core job that at NetApp that we are really focused on, is about building that immunity in the layer.
Right. And another big shift which I see is that it used to be just an infrastructure conversation, right? We used to talk to infra team. It soon became a security conversation.
Absolutely.
And now it has become a board level conversation where CFOs are asking their teams that, what if I have a cyber event?
Yep.
Right? And since it's coming from CFO, that's where the puck is moving, right?
Absolutely. It's not a compliance exercise anymore.
No,
it's all about the board mandate. It's all about how can you bring the platform, the partners, the programs all together to deliver one single outcome for our customers.
Yep.
Which is recovery.
Perfect. So Rohit, my next question to you is, from NetApp point of view, right? What does resiliency mean today, right? And what does it mean today at the storage and data layer together?
Yeah, that's a great question, Boomshi. When you're talking about resiliency at the data layer, as I briefly mentioned, it's all about focus on recovery. It's of course, we have all the prevention. We absolutely need to make sure that we provide the right mechanisms to contain the attack, because you have to control the blast radius. And we are sitting right on the critical real-time data path. So right at as and when the data is being written on the primary storage, how can we get those signals right in place so that our technology can autonomously respond to those attacks? So that's containment. The second aspect, of course, is all about isolation. How do you make sure you provide an environment where customers can actually move their data, which is not on the attack path? That will allow them to ensure that they can recover when the time comes. Again, to your point that you brought up recently, it's not about just having backup and recovery alone. You want to make sure that you can recover clean. You can have a predictable recovery in place. Otherwise, you end up reinfecting your environment again. What we're seeing today is like 70% of the organizations who think they have resiliency in place, when we go and look closer, it's actually not the case. They end up reinfecting the production environment again.
Yeah, I've seen that
a lot.
And
so the whole clean and validated recovery path, the whole orchestrated recovery and isolation is key to resiliency. And that's what we are seeing at NetApp.
Yeah, we are seeing the same trends, and hey, nothing better than getting those signals right from the storage level itself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Where your primary copy of data is sitting. Yeah, and then I can definitely sense that this better together integrations can kind of significantly reduce the downtime for customers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why we are excited about this partnership here.
So do we.
Boomshi, talk a little bit more about when we spoke about resiliency, but would love to get your thoughts. What does it really mean in practice, in real world? What does it mean for Trace3?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So for Trace3, resiliency means, it's an enterprise level capability is what we define as, right? It's not about a product. It's not about a single framework, right? For us, we look resiliency from holistic perspective, not just from technology, but how about people and processes, right? We talked about one of the most important aspect of a cyber resiliency framework is identifying your minimum viable company.
Absolutely.
If a CIO or CISO doesn't know, the security team doesn't know, or infrastructure team doesn't know together that what is my crown jewels? What are my crown jewels within the crown jewels? What are my minimum viable, objects to bring my company back? How do we do that? This is where, we kind of come into picture and help customer through our GRC framework, right? Our governance, risk, and compliance framework that, hey, you might have a business impact analysis, but those SLAs were actually created thinking that you will only have a DR event. Those SLAs were never created thinking that you will ever have a cyber event. So working with customers that, hey, this is your minimum viable company. Now let's look at your technology stack, right? Let's look at a technology stack and identify where the gaps are, and then bind it with the incident response plan, right? Now, along with this, there are many other aspects of resiliency. How about your network resiliency? How about your identity resiliency, right? How about your hybrid on-prem to cloud? Do you have your proper landing zones defined, right? I see a lot of customers thinking around, hey, we can have on-prem to cloud recovery. Absolutely, you can, but have you tested your applications around that, right? So for us, it's identifying your RPOs and RTOs. That's a table stake, but more importantly, identifying what is your minimum viable company and using that IP, identifying what is your cyber recovery RTO, right? So, and then we do it in form of couple of assessments. We do have what we call rapid assessments, wherein we come do some 5,000, 10,000 foot level analysis of your environment, but we also offer a very deep ransomware recovery readiness assessment as well, wherein we, as I mentioned, we go from top to bottom, start with GRC perspective, end with incident response, and the middleware is the technology stack, which could be NetApp.
Absolutely.
So Rohit, let me ask you this question then, right? That from NetApp perspective, what does cyber resiliency means?
Cyber resiliency is not a tool or a product. Like our worldly view is pretty much as you illustrated. It's all about how do we bring the right processes, the platform, and the programs in partnership, of course, to solve a customer problem. Of course, there is an aspect of that we play to our strengths at the data layer. Storage is the last line of defense, but the most critical line of defense, because data is your crown jewel.
Yep.
And so for us to ensure that how can we quickly contain the attack right at the primary data layer becomes super important. So building resiliency right at the primary data layer, not as a bolt-on, not as an afterthought about that's what are you going and detecting for ransomware on your backup data or on your primary data path? Reducing the blast radius is so important when you're thinking about recovering fast and with the minimal data loss. So that's containment is one part of one important part of our resiliency. The second part, of course, is about how do we make sure that we give customers that trust and confidence that they can recover with speed, rapidly and cleanly. Like you don't want to reinfect your production environment. So it's extremely important where you're detecting most advanced malwares or the encryption attacks that are hiding in your data. Super important from that whole isolated recovery play that we are focused on as part of our core infrastructure strategy as well.
Yeah, no, interesting. Isolated recovery plate or isolated recovery area. That is another very hot topic. It has been there for quite some time, but I'm seeing a massive adoption of this whole concept of isolated recovery area or plane.
Absolutely. Like, look, ransomware attacks, and specifically you're talking about ransomware here, the attackers are getting sophisticated. Ransomware is double extortion, in my opinion, is a triple extortion attack. Like, attackers are making sure that all of your backdoors are closed. They want to kill all your recovery points.
Yep.
It becomes super important to think about how can you keep your minimum viable business running And that's where the isolation play comes super critical. And that's what we are hearing from customers. How can they keep their business running even while during the attack event to the cyber event?
Yeah, here we go. Minimum viable business again. This is the third time we are talking. So anyone who's listening should understand the value of this concept. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the core aspects to your point around minimum viable business is about understanding what is your most important data, right? What is your most important asset that you want to protect? And that's one of the core aspects of intelligence that we have also built into the data layer, so that it becomes super easy for our customers to identify what is critical versus that's something that they need to prioritize and protect and recover.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't knew about that though. That is very interesting. So Rohit, let's talk about how Trace3 and NetApp will be working together with our clients to kind of help clients building their resilient environments, right? So for example, from Trace3 perspective, right? Resilience is one of the top 3 plays this year in our playbook. So as a company, as a whole company, we are putting a very heavy emphasis on this overall resiliency practice, right? And that's where we'll be working with partners like you to provide that strong framework to the customers. And then, I said we have developed some very strong assessments for customers, which are kind of a door openers, right? Not only for us, but for customers themselves, right? Because they need a second pair of eyes rather than, and then they do a lot of audits, but then somebody has to come and look at those audits, right? And that's where I think we are putting a very, heavy emphasis on. So Rohit, what does the NetApp and Trace3 better together look like in 2026?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, you rightly said like Trace3's top priority is cyber resilience, and so is NetApp. For us, that is our top customer imperative. It aligns, our missions are aligned over here. We want to give the most secure storage for our customers, most resilient storage and data infrastructure for our customers. And when I look at Trace3 and NetApp as a better together, it's about building on each other's strengths. Trace3 has the security expertise and doing the assessments, and we have the tooling and the core infrastructure, which we are focused on making it more resilient. How can we both move our customers beyond those tools and assumptions and give them that confidence that we have your back? We can help you recover in the worst of the situations.
Right. And as you might know, the history of Trace3 and NetApp is right from the inception. We were born with NetApp partnership.
Absolutely.
Right? So NetApp was our first partner, which our founders back in the days onboarded. So the history is pretty strong. The engineering strength, which is the most important to me personally, is extremely strong. And now bolting on with our cyber resilience practice together, I think it makes a perfect recipe for customers.
Absolutely.
Right?
Collectively, we can give that confidence to our customers that they've never seen before. And so we're really excited about this.
Right. And I'm glad to hear that, NetApp has came out from, of course, you guys are pioneer in storage. But in today's world, pioneer in storage is absolutely important, but the most important rally cry is resilience. So I'm very happy to hear that NetApp is putting so much emphasis on their cyber resilience feature sets as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's how we talk about, sure, storage is one aspect, but it's all about the data infrastructure.
Right.
When customers are trusting with their data on our infrastructure, we owe it to them. It's important. Resiliency, building that immunity in the core is super important. So excited about the partnership here.
So Rohit, my next question to you is that a lot of organizations have backup, right? If an organization doesn't have a backup,
yeah,
the CIO should resign. But not every organization has the overall resiliency, right? And we see this a very common denominator in majority of the clients, right? And still, even after this ransomware word has been there for what, 6-7 years now, right? Even now we get into a lot of conversations where the mindset is still backup, right? So, and that's where we see that a lot of clients kind of get exposed. It's always a hard conversation, right? There's always tough to accept at times. So, how do we jointly solve this problem together?
Yeah, that's a great question. As you mentioned, many organizations have backup on paper and they believe they have resiliency in place. But as you go and look closer, we see three key gaps that comes along with it. First, resiliency as an outcome is not owned by one single team.
Well said.
You have fragmentation across within an organization. Security is looking at detection, storage is looking at what it does at the infrastructure layer, and the backup team is looking at recovery. So how do we bring it all together into a solidified resiliency program? This is one of the areas which we can definitely collectively address and solve.
Right. No, you rightly said, as I said, unfortunately, fortunately, we have been involved in some large ransomware recovery events. And my first one was early 2020, where I got a call from some of our leaders and, one of our customer and whatnot. And I was up, and it was right in the middle of COVID. So my team was up for 5 days. And that's where we ourselves learned that this is a different ball game altogether, right? There are so many examples like, hey, I have my backed up data, but it's taking 2 weeks to recover my Active Directory at forest level, right? So I have a backup data, but that data is like a headless chicken, who to authenticate with, right? And then comes security teams, right? We had a situation where, again, early days are of our own ransomware events, where we were involved, that I have a backed up data, but the security team came in, then, I'm not going to let you recover the data. Please recover the data in this environment. We'll run our forensics, and then we will let you recover the data. We were shouting, not we, but we collectively as customer team and us, that, hey, guys, we have the data, but it took us 3 to 4 days because, hey, security team has to do their job, and they might have been instructed by some forensics analysis team, the 3-letter agencies or whatnot, but so it wasted 3 days. So there are many other, personal experiences which we can share. So what we did was we collected all our personal experiences working with different customers, being in those shoes, right? And remember I mentioned our ransomware recovery readiness assessment.
Yeah.
That assessment is, and I'm pretty proud of that, because whenever we did that, customers were like, it was an eye opener, right? So using all that tribal knowledge of my team, we created this assessment, and we actually look at the scenarios with customers that, hey, your environment was encrypted, which means that your storage utilization is bloated first, and then 3-letter agency or your retainer company will come and say, you cannot touch that data and you cannot remove that data because I need to run my forensics on that. Which means that you have the backed up data, but you don't have storage to recover that data.
Yeah.
Again, this is my team's own personal experience, that we wasted 3 days in an emergency procurement of data, for example.
Absolutely.
So that's where, and then I said, how soon? Everyone claims that I can do some threat detection, but how soon is important.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that is the second gap that we see where your detection is happening on backups.
Exactly.
So you're not talking about weak delayed detection. You want detection on the real-time data path. So that goes to the point that I was talking about earlier, is about early containment is so important to avoid the spread. That is one core area that we have focused on to provide autonomous ransomware protection right at the critical path as the data is being written. How do we identify the various patterns of encryption, the anomalous behaviors that we see at the I/O level, at the data layer, right at the primary layer? So that's another area that we see a critical gap. And to your point, the third part, which you're talking about, the recovery readiness and assessment, it is so important. Customers assume that backup is the end all be all, which we discuss is not the case. It's important that you are doing those drills. You are understanding what it means to recover in case of an attack. It cannot be an afterthought.
Yeah.
And that is where the expertise is needed. And most importantly, when any organization is under an attack, what it really means is your primary clusters could be confiscated as well, because it could have highly sensitive data. So how do we make sure that recovery is not an easy play? It's just not about tool, go click a button and everything just works like a charm. Right. You're talking about data, you're talking about network, you're talking about identity.
A lot.
And all of this comes together across breaking down silos across different teams, right? And more importantly, how do you go about replicating a cluster configuration, right, to make sure that you can keep the minimum viable business running? So it's not a one man's job. You need a army of professionals over there in the customer environment to help them keep running the business while they do the forensics. And this is where we are excited to bring all the infrastructure with your expertise together.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. But at the same time, we get into a lot of conversations with CISOs, CIOs that, hey, you know what? I have an amazing XDR and MDR tool, right? Why do I need to even scan the data? Hey, there is there are things falling through the cracks. That's why you are getting these anomalies, right? So you need defense in depth.
Absolutely.
Right? You need defense in every layer of environment, be it a perimeter control, be it at a storage level, right? Or be it at a data protection level as well, right? It's, as I said, I'm a strong believer in defense in depth, because not every layer, or I would say every layer, would have some sort of Achilles heel somewhere, right? So, yeah, I mean, this is exactly what we are seeing. And I think with the things which we are working together, the frameworks which we are working together, I think we'll build a very strong, immutable, air-gapped, at a storage level framework for customers.
Absolutely. Yes. And you rightly pointed out, defense in depth is so key, and it is becoming even more important with the advent of AI. It's funny, right? I mean, you talk about AI, which is helping us prevent and recover from attacks, to AI, which is a force multiplier for attackers. So,
yes.
So as AI and identity plane, you have to assume the breaches will happen. So you need to make sure you're closest to the data and your resiliency is engineered right at the data layer. Super important.
Yeah, I mean, since you mentioned AI, one of the part of our very strong resiliency playbook this year is going to be AI resiliency preparedness. That, hey, you have thousands of AI agents. What if AI agent goes rogue, right? How do you bring it back?
Absolutely.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, AI is a blessing, but at the same time, it gives me chills sometimes. I said the 12 times I was reading somewhere that there was an incident in a customer place where dwell time was 5 minutes. It used to be 90 days or more. So imagine, the speed and scale of identifying those threat actors is becoming utmost important because the dwell times are reducing. And that's where, I like this story of doing this threat detection within your storage plane itself. I would like to add on our Better Together story, which we were talking about, right? The things which we are envisioning together around ransomware recovery as service, right? So tell me a little bit about what we are working together.
Yeah, I think the first aspect, as you mentioned, around building that playbook. How do we go and assess the customer's environment? How do you go and identify the choke points for the customer so that we can put the right protection and policies in place? How do we enable all the right controls for immutability? How do we make sure that they have an air-gapped cyber vault to back up their data? You don't want the data to be on the attack path, as we discussed around isolated recovery. So bringing this all together into a single program and from all the way from assessment to recovery is what we are really excited about.
Yeah. So we are, I love it. I think this is going to be a very good play for our customers.
Absolutely. Boomshi, as you called out, right? Trace3 and NetApp has been together since inception. And it's been a fantastic journey together. And as we look ahead and in the world of where the threat landscape is evolving rapidly, our partnership is going to go to the next level, given the context and our joint focus in cyber resiliency. So we're really excited about what we have together and what we can drive the outcome for our customers.
No, we are excited as well. And believe you me, I was dying to work with you guys, but you guys were always storage centric. But now with your emphasis on cyber resiliency, I think we'll do some good things together.
Yeah, absolutely. Vamshi, as AI and identity become the control plane for everything, from your perspective and Trace3 perspective, what does the next generation of resiliency look like? What's the vision there?
Yeah, I think we touched upon it a little bit before when we were talking about AI, but for us, as I said, AI risk and governance is a specific practice within Trace3, right? We have some amazing practitioner who specifically work on what we call AI readiness framework, right? Because we hear from multiple different customers about, hey, I have this project, but hey, Mr. Customer, are you even ready? Right? So that's, as I said, a very heavy emphasis on overall AI strategy, right? Which starts with a very strong foundation of AI readiness. Now, from resiliency perspective, as I mentioned, one of the very important rally cry this year is going to be how do we help customer creating more of a resilient AI environment, right? Secure, of course, but also a resilient AI environment. So that is something which we are already working on with multiple different partners like you guys, right? And identity, as I said, that's top of the food chain. We have a very strong identity and access management practice, all in all, wherein our amazing engineers who can do a very deep analysis on your overall identity posture, right? Not only just from not human identities, but from NHI non-human identity perspective, right? But having said that, we are here to talk about resiliency, right? So identity resiliency, as I mentioned before, is when we do an assessment, that is, even if customer says it's our tier 2 application, which I don't know why customer would say that, we still keep it as tier 0, right? It's not just your normal authentication mechanism, but your octas and ping identities and do security kind of SIAM kind of identity providers as well, right? So how we make those resilient is kind of one of the most important parameter of our resilience framework or assessment which we do. So I would rather ask the same question to you guys. I mean, what is NetApp's vision? Because I said I talked more about resiliency perspective, but you can talk more about what is overall NetApp vision around AI and identity.
Well, from a resiliency perspective, like our philosophy doesn't change. You have to assume that AI and identity control plane will be hacked.
Yep.
It's so you have to assume breach. It becomes all the more important to build even more immunity into the core infrastructure layer. So your infrastructure has to become intelligent. You're talking about agents, AI agents. So attackers, AI is a force multipliers. So AI agents, your attack surface becomes even more complicated and it broadens. And AI agents operating at a machine speed. So it's equally important that you build that resiliency at the data layer because the speed at which you want to respond to the attacks becomes paramount. That
Yeah.
is where self-protecting, autonomously protecting and getting the latest threat intel feed to the latest ransomware variants. Or you're talking about self-healing. How can I observe the behaviors right at the data path? How can I analyze and interpret? And how can I act without any human intervention? Imagine an attack happens 3 a.m. in the night, and you don't want humans to be involved. You want the infrastructure should be intelligent enough to autonomously respond to that attack, and create those recovery points and heal the recovery infrastructure. So it's become all the more important that the security, the resiliency at the data layer, is shifting further down the stack, as opposed to just staying upstream, sending alerts to your security personnel, and then the whole workflow triggers. The speed at which you need to operate to reduce the attack is going to be even more important than before.
Yeah. AI agent goes rogue and does thousands of refund
Absolutely.
in a snap. In a snap.
And more importantly, your data for AI, data is food to AI. Your models that are stored in the infrastructure, you need to make sure that those are not poisoned. How do we make sure that those critical assets are preserved in the world of agents and AIs? So yeah, I mean, self-healing and autonomously protecting, understanding the latest threats becomes more important than ever before in the world of AI.
I agree. And this is exactly what we are seeing and we are hearing from customers as well, the concern.
Yeah, and I'm excited. Like at RSA, we'll be demoing some aspects of these capabilities at our booths. I would really encourage folks to come and look at the latest innovation that NetApp is doing. So I'm extremely excited about that.
I'll swing by.
Absolutely.
Now, as we wrap things up, right? What are the key takeaways you would point out to our viewers watching this podcast?
One, get your assessments done. Get your ransomware recovery assessments done ASAP. This is where Trace3 is going to help tremendously. Two, turn on your primary detection mechanisms in place. The autonomous ransomware protection, AI-driven capabilities that have built on the primary data path, go and turn that on. Bring your cyber vault for an isolated recovery environment. Make sure that you have that isolation in place so that you can recover confidently from any of these attacks.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, right? I would say the same thing. You know, if you are not confident, if you have any dilemma in thinking that when shit hit the fan, you can recover the data, start with an assessment. Bring second pair of eyes who can not only just look at the technology stack, but look at the framework, the complete framework. And I can't emphasize enough to my viewers that identifying your bare minimum company, minimum viable hospital, whatever industry you work with, has to be the foundation of any ransomware recovery framework.
Absolutely.
Without that, it's a recipe for disaster. Any assessments without that are like headless chicken assessments.
Absolutely.
Right. So yeah, with that, guys, this is the wrap up of this podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure and looking forward.
Perfect. Thank you.